The world over have a great deal in common. If these memory methods are so effective and universal, they must be directly related to the way the brain works. It is the only common factor. And even more exciting, especially for someone over 60, as I am, is that current neuroscience research on the plasticity of the brain indicates that it doesn't have to decline with age. I am convinced that we're very much poorer for not using our memories effectively anymore. Could this be a contributing factor to the prevalence of dementia and the general acceptance that memory fades with age? Or does it in fact fade with lack of use? Early in my university research as a mature-age student, I happened to visit Stonehenge with my husband Damien, who was studying archaeology. I knew very little about it except that non-literate cultures, who had built ancient monuments all around the world, including Stonehenge, Easter Island Moai, and Nazca Lines, and the many monumental sites across the Americas, had always used memory methods closely related to the way the brain works. It became clear to me that a significant proportion of the purpose of sacred places was to do with memorizing and conveying critical knowledge. Nearly a decade later, PhD in hand, my ideas on Indigenous cultures and archaeology were published by Cambridge University Press as Knowledge and Power in Prehistoric Societies, Orality, Memory and the Transmission of Culture, 2015. The thorough examination by archaeologists, anthropologists, and memory experts of both my thesis and the resulting book gave me the authority to take these ideas to the mainstream reader with the book The Memory Code, 2016. Interested though readers were in the new ideas about archaeology and anthropology, by far the greatest interest was in the extraordinary memory techniques described and how these could be applied in everyday life. I started experimenting with a huge range of memory methods over 10 years ago, and in the few years since these last two books were published, those experiments have dominated my life. I have memorized more than I would have conceived possible about prehistory, history, geography, birds, mammals, trees, and the complex spider families. I've memorized the periodic table, the history of writing, the history of timepieces and musical instruments. I have engaged with the lessons to be learned from the lives of the 130 historic figures I have chosen to be my ancestors. I've used the memory methods to learn vocabulary for French and Mandarin and those difficult Chinese characters. I've memorized the history of art and attended classes to create contemporary works that reflect ancient memory techniques. I don't know everything about all of these topics, far from it, but I've memorized structures on which I can build more and more intricate understanding throughout the rest of my life. Oh, and I now memorize shuffled decks of cards and long lists of random numbers for fun and competition. It really is fun, although I would never have believed it possible if I hadn't tried it for myself. I'm not suggesting that you memorize the things I have chosen. They are examples of how the vast range of memory techniques used throughout time and around the world can be implemented in our lives today. That is what this book is about. What you'll learn. Common sense would tell you that the advent of writing would destroy the need for memory methods. But memory methods persisted, taught in ancient Greek and Roman schools, in the monasteries of the Middle Ages and well into the Renaissance. It's from this time of early literacy that we get the easiest starting point for us to learn the memory arts. We'll start with the critical role of the imagination. I'll show you how to use your playful and creative inventiveness to memorize information with very straightforward medieval techniques. I'll then build up to the more complex techniques from Indigenous cultures, where you can start to choose which method or even combination of methods suits your particular need. Throughout the book, I'll give you examples of how I have implemented each of these techniques, just to make my explanations clearer. Not because I expect you